Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. So again, welcome to CommunityForce, and today we're going to be covering our scholarship session, and we're going to be talking about creating your application form. And I'm Christine Smith. I'm the trainer here with CommunityForce, so I'll be going through this session with you today. And during the webinar, all of the attendees have been muted. And as we go through the training session, I will break midway through for a question and answer section. And at that point, you will be able to ask questions regarding some of the topics that we're covering, that we've covered already. So as we're going through the session, if you do have questions, you'll notice there is a question box that you can go to type in your question. You would simply just type it in here and then click send. And then when we get to that question section, I will review the questions that you've sent me and go ahead and answer them at that time. And then also you'll notice this little icon here. If you don't see the question box, you should see a little dialog box somewhere on your screen with this little orange arrow, of course. And if you click that orange arrow, it will open up the dialog box that you see, similar to what I have shown here. Also, there is this hand raising icon that you can use to raise your hand if you are having a difficulty. Unfortunately, I don't have my assistant, Daniel Ayala. He's usually on the call. He's our sales manager, but he did have another appointment, an engagement that he needed to attend to today. So if you raise your hand, I'll try to get to you, but we do need to move forward with the session. So we are recording this session, and it will be available if for some reason you cannot connect or you lose connection. So of course, today what we're going to be discussing will be beneficial for any users on your system that are the administrators, so that would be the back-end users that are responsible for building your application form, adjusting, maybe adding questions to your form, removing questions. We'll talk about some of that today in the session. So those are the individuals that will benefit from this session. And then, of course, we're going to be covering how to build your application form. So we're going to talk about how to create a new application, how to clone an existing application that you may already have built on the site, the general information setup, that's kind of what I call the control panel for your application form. And then we'll also talk about creating sections, how to create questions, and then those pre-qualification questions. If you want to use pre-qualification questions, what those are and how you would set those up, as well as text tabs, what those are and how those can be used, request instructions, so those are the instructions to the applicant if you have those request sections, and then also the online submittal message. So these are the key components that are used to build a basic application form. And so let's go ahead and go to the site and get started. So I'm going to log in here to the site. And so when you first log in, of course, this is the home dashboard that you come to. And the home dashboard, of course, is the main dashboard that gives you access to the main areas of your site. Now, something I do want to touch on in regards to building an application form. Now, of course, an application form is very different from a paper form, and the majority of you already have had our team more than likely build the application form for you. So whenever you're building an application form, you always want to think about what you want to pull out of that application. And then so that determines your way that you're going to build the application, the type of questions you want to format. You know, like if you're wanting to pull reports on specific data and you have questions that you have certain values you're looking for, certain replies, then a lot of times those specific types of questions, in order to pull a report on those, you want to force answers. You want to create what we call drop-down questions, or questions like checkbox questions, where you're giving them the answer and then they can select the answer. That way it's easier to pull on a specific item. You don't have to worry about them typing something different or them having a misspelling, them abbreviating a word. You're giving them the answer and forcing that answer on them when those drop-down listings. So that's the kind of things you kind of want to think about when you are building your application form. And then also your review process, making sure that when you build your application form, in your review process, do you have all the required questions for your review committee to be able to review the application form, to be able to retrieve the data they need to be able to do that review process. So those are just some of the things I want to touch on in regards to before building your application form, because those are some of the things I find some people tend to not do, and then they get to the end of the process and they can't pull a report on an item. Or they get to the review process and they realize they left out a key question that they needed to capture data on for the review committee. Like one time somebody was wanting GPA. Well, they didn't have that GPA question in their application form. So those are the things you kind of want to look at. So let's go ahead and now and get started building an application. So to build an application form, you would go to the area on your home dashboard here. This one right here. It should be an icon very similar to this one. Some do have it labeled a little bit different. It may say set up application forms. It may say applications, but it is this icon, a piece of paper with a little pencil. It's the same icon and the same location on the dashboard if you're a global administrator. And you just simply click on that application form. And of course, there's two ways you can create an application. You can create a new application, or you can clone an existing application. And of course, the difference between creating a new application means you're creating the application from the ground zero. You have just a blank piece of paper, and now you're filling in the information you need to build that application. However, when you're cloning an existing application, that application that you're cloning, the system will make an exact copy of that application form. So it'll be an exact replica, the same sections, the same questions, the same general information setup, the text tabs. All of that will be part of that application form. So if you have an existing application, you like that application, then more than likely it's going to be easier to clone it and then build and remove questions or add questions to the existing application that you have. So to show you the difference here, create new application, if I was to click on that, I'm going to go ahead and click on it. You'll see the first screen that opens up is the Create New Application screen, and this is the exact same screen as your general information screen that you see when your application is built. So you can kind of see when you first open it up, it's totally blank. There's no data in any of these fields. And then, of course, you would start with entering your scholarship name, the description, and then start filling in the blanks that you see here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and instead of creating one from scratch, I'm going to show you one that's already been cloned that has the data already pre-populated, which will make that easier for you. So let me just do something real quick over here so I can get to the correct section. Okay. So of course here you see the blank information, so I'm going to exit out of here. And when you clone an existing application, you'll just see it's the exact same screen. The only difference with cloning an existing application is when you click the Clone Existing Application, you see the same information. However, you notice at the top it says select the template for an application. So this is where you're going to select this drop-down. You're going to find the application form you want to clone. And then you'll notice as soon as you clone it, all the data from that prior application will be populated in this area. So of course, then you would give it your scholarship name. So if I was cloning this, I might want to just make a new one for the new year. And then maybe a description. So the description is something you see internally. This is nothing that the applicant sees. They do not see this description. This is for you internally to be able to know what the purpose of this application form is. So, whoops. Now the sponsoring organization, you'll notice I have several sponsoring organizations on my site. What the sponsoring organization is used for is a lot of times you will have multiple departments within your organization, and each department has its own application process. And in the user setup, you've set up specific administrative users to only be able to access forms for their organization, or you might have funding sources only for a specific organization as well. And so then only those users that are linked to that specific organization would then only be able to see their organization's information, or their department. You can departmentalize. It's usually used to departmentalize. So that department can only see the ones that have their organization name listed, and then the same with somebody from another department. If they were from another department, they wouldn't be able to see if they were not tagged as part of that organization. So of course you would come here, you would select the organization that belongs to this specific application form. And for those of you that you're the only organization, you would just select your organization name, and then everyone, of course, would have access to that. And you more than likely will also have a select all. Normally it'll show your organization, maybe a test organization. So if you want to select all, then you don't have to worry about it only allowing, one specific organization, or when you set up that user, did you get the organization set up correctly? The next one, does this application have a deadline? So of course the one that I cloned did have a deadline, but if I change this to no, an application that does not have a deadline, so like a rolling application, if it doesn't have a deadline, then you would select no, and there would not be a deadline tied to that application form. However, if you did have a deadline, you would go ahead and select yes. And when you select yes, then of course the begin accepting date and deadline dates will appear. Now, just so you know, on the screen, the first screen that the applicants come to where they view the application listing screen, whenever you see the apply button on that screen next to that specific funding, though that apply button is triggered by these dates. So if you don't see an apply button, that means these dates are not within range. It's not an active form. However, as soon as this date comes into range, it then becomes active, and that apply button is there. And then of course the apply button will go away once the deadline date appears. So these are important dates. This is when they can start applying, and this is the deadline date as to when it will shut that apply button off so they can no longer apply, and click that apply button. So of course the begin accepting date, you would want to be a date that you want the applications to start. And then the deadline date, of course, is the deadline of your application. When do they have to complete this application by? So you would put that deadline date that you want that to shut off. And then the deadline time. Now notice this is Eastern time zone, so of course you would want to make the adjustment for Eastern time zone. And then something else, another thing that I've ran into with some of our clients is the deadline time being 12 a.m. Now this is 12 a.m. on this date. Don't get 12 a.m. confused with 11 or 12 p.m. A lot of people tend to get that confused. This is 12 a.m., so this would be the morning of May 31st, not midnight on June 1st. 12 a.m. would be June 1st. If you wanted June 1st, then you would want to make sure and adjust the time for that specific date. Or a lot of times what we tell people to do is do at 11:30 that time frame, and then it'll shut off at that. But do not get this confused with midnight on the 31st. This is actually 12 a.m. the morning of the 31st. Some people tend to get that confused, and it is Eastern time. The logout URL, which you would insert here, this is the page. So when an applicant starts this application form and they log out, they're in their application form and they log out, they're in that dashboard. The landing page, this logout URL, is the landing page that you want them to be directed to when they actually log off the site. So some of our clients want this to go to their web page, so you can put a specific web page URL on here from your site, or you can simply just use the URL for the CommunityForce site and then have your applicants go to that specific site when they log off, to go back to that page. You can determine what page you want them to land on when they log out. The reply sent from field, this is a field that can be used in email templates. So your notification center are where your email templates are housed. And when creating email templates, you will notice there's a merge field that is called reply to merge field. That's a merge field that you can use to put into your email templates. And this just allows for another location to input a different email address than maybe your lead contact on your site. You can actually enter this person's another person's email, or some may have just maybe an information email that they want certain emails to go to that email and not the contact on the application form. So then you can use that reply to merge field in your email templates, and then whatever email address you enter here will be the email address that will populate in that specific email template. Applicant minimum age. So if you have scholarships and an applicant has a minimum age requirement, so let's say their minimum age is 18. So of course, when an applicant creates their user account, in their user account is a date of birth. And what the system does is if you do enter a minimum age in this field, it will, when they log into the application form, it will look at their date of birth. And if their date of birth shows that they are not of the age of 18, they will get an acknowledgement that will appear on the page, which is this box down here. You can see it works in relationship with that minimum age. They will get an acknowledgement regarding why they were not allowed to apply to that application form. That's only if they don't meet that age requirement, they get this acknowledgement. So of course, if you don't have an age requirement, you can just leave that at 0. You'll leave this acknowledgement blank and you will not complete that specific form. You'll also notice that there is an area on the build of the general information screen for an application form cost. Now this is a special setting in the site settings, and you would have to have the site settings set, and it also works in relationship with integration with a third-party software, a third-party payment software, and that would require a setup, of course, with CommunityForce to set that up. But if you had a cost connected to your application form and you had that payment setting set and the integration created for that payment, then this is where you would enter the monetary value of what it would cost to apply for that application form. Then, of course, when they've got to the section to do the payment, then this is what the system would look at as to the amount that they're required to pay for your application. The next item here, enable pre-qualification during applicant sign-up. If you do use pre-qualification questions, which we will get to those here in a minute, how to set those up, and I'll explain those a little bit more in detail. Those pre-qualifications, if you do create pre-qualification questions, then you want to make sure this is set to yes. If this is set to no, the applicant will not see those pre-qualification questions. It will turn those off and the applicant will not get those. It'll bypass those and they will not have to answer that pre-qualification combo, of course. The next item, enable view matching scholarships. So if you have a complex matching system set up, this is used for clients who have multiple scholarship funds, and each scholarship may have a separate application form. And that's what we call a one-to-one relationship. And they could have maybe 20 of those application forms out on their site. And they can actually set up a matching process that allows applicants to apply to one application form. And of course, there'd be eligibility questions in that application form. All of the scholarships and their applications would have those same questions across the board. And as an applicant answers specific questions that are those key eligibility questions, if you have the matching process set up, then what the system will do is when they apply to one application, they'll say, oh, by the way, you're also matched to these specific scholarships as well if you would like to go ahead and apply for those. It helps them see that they're matched to other ones as well. So of course that is a complex setup that would need to be set up in order to have that matching take place. And so, of course, if you did use the matching, you'd want this to be set to yes. Otherwise, you would set this to no. The next feature we see here is enable multiple submissions. So if you allow your applicants, especially if it's a rolling application, you may have a rolling application with the ability for applicants to come in multiple times throughout the year and apply to that application form. Maybe they can apply and then come back and apply again. If it's the same application form and you want to allow your applicants to apply more than once to that same application form, then you can select yes and allow applicants to have a multiple submission process where they can do an application, file that application, apply with that application, and then they can click the apply button again and apply a second time to that same application form. You'll also notice when I set to enable multiple submissions to yes, another field appears, and this is called enable proxy. And what a proxy is, and of course it has to be set for multiple submissions because a proxy can allow an applicant to invite another or start an application. I should say an applicant can go in, start an application for another individual, create a user account for that individual, and then also notify them that they started the application for them. Now, the person that they are starting the application for, that's their application. So, of course, that person, the person that owns the application, would be able to log in with their login ID and go to their My Applications and complete the remaining portion of the application that the proxy had started for them. So the proxy can start it. It's not their application, but it's someone else's application form. And so if you did want to allow proxies, you could go ahead and select yes, and that allows the applicant to have someone start an application for them. Otherwise, you would set this to no. And the reason we have multiple submissions is because, of course, a proxy could be an applicant applying for themselves, and a proxy could also be applying on behalf of someone else. So that's why you would have to have multiple submissions set on that. But of course, if you don't want proxy, then you set it to no. Now, enable collaborators, that does not work with the multiple submission. However, the enable collaborators, what that does is that allows an applicant to start their application form and say they come to a section that they need assistance on. And so what they can do is they can collaborate with other individuals that have user accounts on the system. So they'd have to collaborate with someone who has an applicant account. And they can, if they don't have an applicant account, if you allow applicants to create the profile, there's a setting that you can set to allow them to create profiles. They can create an applicant account for that individual they want to collaborate with. But once they set who they want to collaborate with, and that person has a user account, then they can say, okay, this is my collaborator on my application, and I want to give that individual access to a specific section in my application form. So I say who my collaborator is, I select the section that they're to collaborate on. I can do multiple sections, I can just pick one section, and then an email will go to the collaborator, and the collaborator will then log into their account using their login credentials, and they will go to a tab that says My Collaborated Applications. When they click on that tab, it will take them to the applicant's application form. They can click on the application form name and see only the icons of that applicant's dashboard that the applicant has given them access to. So this is the applicant making the decision as to who they want to collaborate with. So if you do want collaboration, then you can set this to yes, and then the applicant can collaborate with other individuals. Now, nomination type, this is different than a collaboration in that what this is nominations are those request sections. A lot of you that are our clients have those request sections. And a request section is different from a collaboration in that you as the administrator determine what sections are request sections. The applicant doesn't determine, who's going to be doing it or what sections they want them to do. You as the admin are saying this question, this section, the specific section is a request section. And on request section types, the applicant must give the information, contact information for the person that's responsible for completing that. So for instance, it could be like a letter of recommendation. So the applicant has to do 3 letters of recommendation in their application form. And they have to give you the name, the contact, and the email of that individual they want to do the letter of recommendation. That email gets sent out to that individual. The individual clicks on the link, comes to that section, completes the section, submits just that section, and then the applicant's notified that that section's been completed. That's a request section. So this little setting here, like I said, it can be used for letters of recommendation. The single setting means you have 3 different request sections you've built in your application, and all 3 of those sections, the applicant can only invite 1 person to complete all 3 of those sections. However, multiple means that on a request section, if you have 3 different, like you had 3 letters of recommendation, 3 sections, letter of recommendation 1, 2, and 3. Multiple means an applicant can invite 1 individual to do the letter of recommendation 1 section, a different individual for 2, and a third individual for 3. And so that's what the majority of our clients choose, is this multiple. The enable editing after submit. So what that does is when an applicant submits their application form, they can be locked out after they submit. They automatically are locked out after submit. So if you want to override that, you can select yes. And selecting yes means that once the applicant submits, they can go back in and edit that application form. So enable editing after submitting. If it's set to no, they cannot edit after submit. If it's set to yes, that means that yes, you do want to enable this and you want them to be able to edit after they submit their application form. The next 2 items, the show applicant to committee. So what the show applicant committee does is if you are you have a review process and you do not want your committee members to see the names of your applicants, it's a private review process, then you would say show applicant to committee no. Now this hides only the name in the report listing. So the committee members, of course, they get the task they're assigned to, they see the list they click on that task, and then they see the applicants that they've been assigned to. So what this does is turns that name off of that report that they see, that listing, it makes it a number. And then when you look at the application form itself, when they're clicking on the application form, instead of seeing the name at the top of the application form, they'll see a number there. That's what this does. This doesn't hide, of course, if you have a section in the application form with personal information, that would be another setting you would have to set, as well as specific questions. You would have to hide those as well. This doesn't hide everything. This just hides the name from their application form being on the application form, as well as in any reports that your reviewers see. Now the next one, the show application to committee, this turns off the review process so that your committee members don't even get to see the application at all. They can't access the application or any portion of the review process. It's turned off completely, and it cannot be assigned to them if that's set to yes. And then finally, on the general information page, you'll see these are the dashboard instructions. So these are those instructions that the applicant sees on the dashboard when they log into the application. These are those instructions that you're giving them as to how to complete their application form. So of course, then once you've completed this information, you can either save as you are going through, you could keep saving, or once you're completely done, you can hit save and exit. And then once you save and exit, you'll have that new application form built. So let me go find it here. I should have numbered it so I could find it quicker. Here it is. So you'll notice here's the application that I just built. There's the start and end date that I set, and it still hasn't been published, and that has to do with the publishing of the application. This would be marked to yes when it's actually linked to that funding source. You can see there's no funding source linked to it yet, and that's what would make it published, of course. So it's not published, no one can see it yet. I'm still building it, so I don't have to worry. As long as I don't have that grant or that scholarship tied to it, then I don't have to worry about applicants being able to access it yet. So then, of course, I'm not done building it, so now I can click on the application name. And when I click on the application name, that will take me to the application build dashboard. So here's this general information icon. This is where we just were. So if I click on this general information icon, you'll see these are the same items we just set up. But there's one more setting when you build an application form that you want to set after you've created it. So you want to go back into that general information right after you've created it so you don't forget to add this. And that's the contact. So the applicant contact is that key person that anytime you see in your notification center an email that says this email is sent to the application contact. So like if an applicant withdrew their application, there's an email that comes to the application contact. There's also settings in site settings where every time an applicant submits their application form, an email goes to the application contact. There's also merge fields in your email templates that say contact name, contact email, contact first name, contact last name. Those are looking at this applicant contact. So of course, if you are using those fields, or if you want those emails to go to your application contact, you have to set a contact on your application form. Otherwise, those fields won't be populated and no one will be notified in any other process with those specific notifications. So to add a contact, you click Add a Contact. The person does have to be an admin on the site, so you would have to find them in the listing. So let me see if I can find someone here. And then once you find them, you can only have one contact per application form, but you would select them and then click OK to confirm that they're the contact, and then they'll be here on that contact. Now, of course, if you wanted to change the contact, you can click the edit, or you can delete this individual and then add a new person if you wish. And then, of course, now you're done. You can hit save and exit, and you're done with the general information section. So I know that was a lot to cover on the general information. So before I get to some of these other icons here that are quick little icons to cover, I'm going to stop here and just kind of see if we have any questions from anybody that there was any questions on some of the items that we've covered so far here. So let me just go to my question box here and see what we have. Okay, someone is asking, is this webinar just for scholarships? And it is a scholarship webinar. We are covering the scholarship site. However, if you are a grant user, then the screens that we're seeing today are pretty much the same icons as you would see in the grant. It's the same process for setting up an application. The setting up of questions, a lot of it is very similar. They're very similar sites, except one says scholarship, use a scholarship language, and of course the grant site would use the grant site language. So someone is asking, can you only clone an active scholarship template? So when we talk about active, an active template would mean that it's not archived. And of course, you'll see here when I go out to my home screen to the applications, you can see I do have a few pages here. And I don't know if you mean active by here or archive. You can see I do have some archived applications. And when I click the clone existing, you'll see here that I'm getting the majority of just the ones that are active. So they cannot be archived, but they can be in the active screen and available. Not active within those start and end dates, because that can mean active too in our language. So active meaning active where they haven't been archived. If they're archived, then they will not show in that setup. 2018. Okay, so back to, and then the next one. is a question. When you select Enable Editing after submitting, will it lock the applicant out after the deadline? With that specific setting, I'm under the impression that they can still go in and make changes even after deadline. But that's something you can always test out to confirm. Okay, and then another question is, can the enable editing after submitting question be set to allow editing up to a certain date and time and then not allow it? Again, that kind of is in relationship to that other question, and I apologize, I did get that wrong. After they submit their application form and the deadline is passed, they will not be able to go in and edit that specific after the deadline. And so, of course, to allow editing up to a certain date and time and then not allow it, that would be that deadline, of course. Okay. Someone wants to know about, let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger on my other screen here. So if an organization is offering multiple scholarship applications, so you have more than one application available, when an applicant applies, you can have, there's a setting in site settings that allows applicants to import data from one application to another. Now, of course, all of those application forms have to have the same section XML name and question XML names for all the sections and questions that they need to import data from. If they do not match, the applicant will not be able to import that data from one application form to another. So if an XML language is in every section that's created, it has an XML name in the section, as well as questions also have XML names. And if those do not match in application 1, and when it's looking for data in application 2, it does not find that exact XML name, it will not be able to import that data. So that's the most key important component for applicants to be able to import data. There's also a special feature called agency profile, applicant profile on the administration dashboard, that if you have a master template and all your application forms are cloned from the master template, of course, so that they all have the same XML sections and names, then an applicant can create their application profile, their applicant profile in their view edit profile. And then every time they start an application form, all of that specific data in that profile setup that you as the admin have set up as key information will be populated in their application form. And yes, there is going to be, this training is being recorded, so you will be able to get a copy of that. If the ramifications, somebody asked a question, if we leave that field reply sent from blank on an application setup, what it will do is default to our server. So the ramification would be, do not use that merge field in your notification templates. If you do not put that in your notification template, so if you have a template that has the reply to merge field in it, then when that goes out to the applicant, that data will be blank. And they will try to reply, and of course, it'll go back to our server. So that's what would happen. So if you don't want to use it, then you need to take it out of your email templates, of course. Archiving applications, we'll get to that at another time. Archiving is just a matter of simply going to the application here in the listing. Actually, I'll just go ahead and show you real quick. If you want to archive it, you select it, click archive, and that application's been archived, and then you'll be able to view it in the archive listing. And then in the archived listing, if you want to bring it back and make it active again, you just select it, mark it as active, and it'll come back and be on the active listing. It's that simple. That's how you would do it. Invite-only applications, you do not publish the grant. And so that'll be, that was how you would do an invite-only. You create the application, you tie it to the grant. You do not publish the scholarship, sorry. You do not publish the scholarship itself. That scholarship setup, there's a publish button that says yes or no. You would want to make sure that that scholarship was marked as published no. the one that's tied directly to the application form, and then that's how you would do an invite-only application through the application invitation process. Okay. All dates are Eastern time. There are none of our program is Central time. All of the dates on our system are Eastern time, so anytime you pick a date, it is Eastern time. And then someone's asking, can you use one application for a variety of different scholarships that are being offered in the same year? So you can have what we call a one-to-many application process, which means you have one application form. It's the exact same application to be able to apply to multiple fundings. So you can have one application, and in that one application, they can have all these criteria questions, and then there's a matching feature that works in relationship with the fund, and we will get into the fund setup portion of that in our next training next month. A brief overview of that. Of course, we don't have a lot of time to go into detail. This could be a 3-hour training if we covered every aspect. But you can have that one-to-many, and of course, you would have to have in the application all the questions required for all of those specific funds, and then link that so they just have the one application they apply to, and then the system does all the matching in the background, which is different from that view matching. That's if you have multiple scholarships. So that's it for the questions for now. So I'm going to go in now and start with the other settings here. So I'm going to go back into the application. Where am I? I'm in active. And touch on some of these items here real quick, like the submit application message. So this is the message when an applicant submits their application form. This is the online message that they see. They get the online message, and then also with the online message, they get the email sent to them. But this is the online message. It's a text box, so you can see anytime you see a text box, then that text box can just be populated with information. You'll also notice Manage Text tabs. And what Manage Text tabs do is you can see there's 5 tabs, and text tabs will create on the applicant's dashboard a button. And so whatever you give the display name, so whatever you typed here, like maybe you want to provide FAQs for your applicants. And so you want to provide a button on their dashboard. The button would look similar to the Save button, except it would say FAQ. Whatever I put in the display name, that's what it would put there. And then here in the text box, this is where you would simply just type in the information that you want the applicant to see when they click that button. It's textual only. And then that would be the name of the button. Sometimes some individuals like to use it maybe for additional information in regards to this funding. They can funding questions or additional information, they call the button. And then of course, if you do use it, then you would want to make sure and click the published and publish that button, and then that would be available on the applicants to be able to see that specific item when they click on it. And you have 5 of those available to be able to use. And if you want to activate them. Now know when you clone an application, one thing that I do want to stress is when you clone an application, if you had these built, you do want to make sure and go in and republish the buttons, because when you clone an application, it does not publish them. It unpublishes them all, and you will need to go in and add that published to it. And now the pre-qualification questions, let me get into those. What pre-qualification questions are? Our pre-qualification questions allow you to create kind of a combination or for applicants to be able to access your site. So when they click the apply button, before they get to the application dashboard, they would have to actually complete the answers to these questions, and it would be a combination. These questions can only be yes, no questions. They have to be able to answer yes or no. There's no other replies that can be created for those. And so the yes, no, they can say, so like here, are you a high school senior attending these counties? They say yes to that. And so what you would do is you would come up here and just simply click add a question. This is where you would type in the question. and then you just hit save and exit. It says the record's been updated, and then you'll see the question. This is where you build the questions. Then down here is where you create that proceed combination. So you'll notice each of the questions that are created at the top has a separate column. And underneath that column is where the combination for that specific question. So of course this one here, how would they have to answer this question in order to have access? How do they answer this one, yes or no? And then this one here, maybe I want this to be set to no. And then I would set that combination. But maybe there's multiple combinations to allow them access. So if I wanted to add another one, I hit the plus sign. You'll notice when I hit the plus sign, it opens up this level. And so maybe they could say no to this question, but if they say no to this question, they must say yes to this one and yes to this one. And so you can see it gives you the opportunity to set a multiple of different combinations that allow them access. So if they type in that combination, they say yes to the correct combination of questions, they're given access to complete the application form. Otherwise, if they do not hit the correct combination, then they get a denial message, which is what you would type down here in this text box down here. And just so you know, anytime you see a box like this is what we call a text box. This is text only. So all you're doing is typing text in this box. This is where if you have a typo in a question, if it's a text box, you can always adjust that because it's just text only. This is in design mode. Some of you, if you are versed in HTML, you can actually do HTML text to create your items. But I know the majority of our clients prefer the design mode. And that's then where you can use these icons up here to be able to do your formatting. And of course, once you set the combination, you would just hit save and exit. I'm going to cancel and exit because I don't want to change it on this application form. But then those pre-qualification questions would be set. And then also remember in general information, we had that specific item that said enable yes or no. So if you use them, you want to make sure that that is set to yes so that it was enabled. Okay. And then we'll go ahead and go on. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to show any items from the applicant's perspective today. This is all admin based. So someone was asking just a quick question about being able to see text tabs, an actual text tab. Unfortunately, because of our time frame, we don't have the time frame to be able to go into showing you the applicant side of the settings as well. But how it would just look like that save button, and that it would be on their dashboard. And then they would click on it and see what that screen is. It's that simple of a view. So the next thing I want to get through here is sections and questions. And we probably will be going over time. So if some of you want to stay on, that's understandable. But we probably do have at least another 20 minutes worth of stuff to cover. So when you come here and click on the sections and questions, you'll notice when we come into the site, into the sections and questions section, we come to what's called the sections listing. And the sections listing is where all the sections on your application form show. So each section, of course, would be a separate icon on your applicant's dashboard. And if you're familiar with the applicant's dashboard, this is where they see the icon. The section name is listed underneath of it, and then usually the deadline for that specific section, which is what you see here. So sections, of course, will more than likely carry the same deadline as your application form. But some of the special features of sections is sections can have their own deadline. So you can set a deadline on a section so that it has its own deadline. And also sections can be set so that there's specific types, so that maybe you want them to appear as part of the initial application. But sections can be also established to appear based on statuses of applicants. So you can have a section not appear to an applicant until maybe they've received an award. They've been selected for an award. They get to a specific status called selected for an award. As soon as they get to that status, bam, this section will appear to that applicant. So you'll start seeing here I have application sections, I have post-accepted sections. There's different types of sections that you can create. So I'm going to kind of go over here and kind of click on a section and kind of go over some of the key settings on the section, because just as the application setup had that little general information section, sections also do as well. So if I click the edit on a section, you'll see it's very similar to what we just covered in the application setup. If you want to create a section that's like, since I cloned this, all the sections are here, but if you didn't clone your application and you needed to create a section, then you would just simply just click the create section, and then you can get that same screen, of course, and then complete the items on that screen. You also have the ability with sections to clone an existing section. So let's say you have another application form, or you have a section built and you want to make copies of it when you're first initially building. You can clone an existing section. However, it's important to note that when you clone an existing section, the logic in sections will not clone over. So what I mean by logic is anytime you have a question where you've set logic, so let's say you have a question and if the applicant says other, answers other, and then you have logic on another question that if the applicant answered other to this question, then show this specific question as well. That's what I mean by conditional logic. So if you clone a section and that section had logic in it, that will not clone over, and you will still have to go in and reset the logic on that cloned existing section. However, when you clone an entire application, that will come over. So of course, the general information section, the section setup page, is this page here that you see here. And so of course, the first item you see is the section name. The section name is what you see internally. You see it doesn't have any alpha or numeric spaces. This is your internal name that you see. The display name, however, is the name that the applicant sees, the section display name. So when the applicant comes to this section, this is the name that they're seeing. The XML name is that important meta language that helps map the application data from one application to another. So this is when we were talking about that import feature. This is that important XML name. If XML name gets changed, like if you create an application and you clone that application and then you come here and change the XML in the second application, you will not be able to import data from one application to another because this name has been changed and it's been broken, and you won't be able to, a system won't be able to match from one to another. That's where the XML name is very important. So if you have a cloned application and you want to use the import feature and you want this section to be able to import, do not change the XML name. So, or you can, of course, give your XML, when you're creating an application, you want to give it an XML name, but that's what the purpose of the XML name is. And so a lot of times our team, when we're building, we actually, when we create an XML name, we'll actually maybe put the first few letters of a section so that then when we're doing the questions, we can actually put, like this one, we maybe could do BIO underscore and then the name of the section. So we kind of use a special naming convention so we can kind of keep track of what's what and where. Now the section type, this is where in the process is this section going to be used. So of course application means this is a application. This is all part of the initial application form. Every section that says application, I want my applicant to see when they first start their application form. Admin can tag this, helps you tag a section, and that is a staff section. So this is saying this section is only for admin. So when you create this, you can tag it as an admin section. And then of course, when you see that on the front page, that section listing, you see admin. You want to make sure that an admin page has been hidden from the applicant because you do not want them to see that. That would be admin. Accepted sections mean this is a section that you want to appear after the applicant has been awarded. This is maybe another section that you're creating that's an accepted section for the applicant to accept their application form, the award. Post-acceptance would be after they've accepted the award. Maybe you have a reporting feature 6 months after they've accepted the award. Maybe they have to report back on their grades. And so you want them to report back on that same application form. You can create a section called a post-accepted section. And then that allows that section to open up to the applicants, and they can complete that during that 6-month process if that's when you use it. And then request sections, of course, are those special sections that are used that you define as the admin, a section for an applicant that's private from the applicant. The applicant cannot access request sections. and they have to invite a specific individual by giving us the contact and their email to complete that specific section. That's a request section. So of course, those are the ways to tag them. And those are just to tag them so that when you're looking on that front page, you know the specific settings on that front page that should be set on those specific sections. So again, if this was an admin section, then I could tag this as a staff section, yes. And then what that does is that hides the section from the applicant. The applicant would not be able to see a staff section if I had this marked as yes. Even if I did this admin and I said no, they would still be able to see it. However, if I did admin and then set the staff section to yes, the applicant would not be able to see this, and this would be just for internal staff. This could be a section on the applicant's dashboard that I see when I go into it as an admin. The applicant doesn't see it, but I go in and I can answer questions, create questions for me as a staff member to answer regarding that specific application form and that applicant. Another setting here, request section. So if I didn't want to make a request section, I can actually set this to request. And then here, this request section, I would want to mark this as yes. And then the system knows that when this says request section, it builds this specific section. The applicant will not, again, this is also hidden from the applicant. The applicant would not be able to see it. And they will have a button, if you have request sections built, tagging them as yes, the system will build this. They will have a button that says request section. They'll click on that button, and all they will see is the name of the section. They click on the name of that section, and it opens up a contact box where they put the first name, the name of the individual. They give us an email of the individual, and then they can enter comments to go to that person. And then once they save that, it'll send an email to the person that they've selected to complete that section. That person will get an email sent to them. They will have a link in that email that they can click on. Then they click on that link, it will take them directly to the request section. And remember, this is the person being asked to complete this. This is the nominated individual. They come to the section, they can open that section, complete it, and submit it. However, the applicant cannot see how they answered that section. It's totally private. It's a private section for that requested individual, the nominated individual, to complete. So then, of course, once they submit it, the applicant will get an email notifying them that it's been submitted, as well as in the request section, it will show that they requested it. And then once the nominee completes it, it'll show as received to the applicant, so then they know that it has been completed. And then you'll also notice here a hide from reviewer. So this is where if you do have a private process, you can actually hide a question from a reviewer. And then the reviewer will not be, the section I should say, the entire section will be hidden from your review process. They will not be able to access that section if you do not want them to see it. The display order, you'll notice that with the display order, this is the order that it falls on their page. So of course, this is number 1. This is going to be icon number 1. Number 2 would mean number 2 to the right, 3, and so forth. So this is the order that they follow when they're completing the application form. What's the order of the section? Is it the first section, the second section, the third section? This listing here, the section display image, these are our current images. We are working on creating some additional images and a larger chart of images, but currently this is what we have available here. And so this is a listing of the names of the icons. And then if you wanted to change the image, of course, you would just select it, and then that would show you what that image was. Now, email template. If this is not a request section, it's telling me I'm changing it, which is fine. If this was not a request section, this was an application section, you do not have the ability for an email because there's no need for an email at this stage. However, when you make a request section and you say yes to a request section, you will notice there's an email template that appears. And this, of course, is because, of course, you could have multiple request sections. And multiple request sections, of course, are maybe you have a request section for a letter of recommendation. Then you have another request section to the guidance counselor that's going to be capturing the students' transcripts. So those are two different sections looking for two different types of information. So of course the email to the nominated individual, you do not want to be the same email. So that's what this allows, is you can create a nomination email in your notification center. And then if it's created as a nomination email, you can come here and then select the email that you want sent to the nominated individual so that they can get that specific email. And you can have multiple nomination email templates to go with each of your sections. It allows you to select the template you want going to that nominated individual from your listing of templates. So statuses here, this is what I was talking about earlier. So statuses are what our system moves an applicant to as they move through the process. So of course, pending submission means they've started their application form. Submitted, of course, means they've clicked that submit button and they've submitted their application. And then you can kind of see there's some more here under committee review. Selected for an award means they've actually been awarded a final award, so their status will change to that. So as they move through the system, they get put automatically to these statuses. So what you can do is you can create a section. So let's say I want to create an acceptance section. So of course, I don't want all of my applicants that started the application form to get this. So I don't want this set to all, because this would mean no matter where they were when they start the application, no matter what status they are, they would see this section. So an accepted section, I would only want an applicant to receive if they were selected for an award. I would only want them, as soon as they got to that status, to see this section. So I would set this accepted section on selected for an award. And of course, if they accepted or declined that section, I would want them to still see that section, but they were awarded. So now I want to know if they've accepted or declined it, but I still want them to maybe be able to see that section. So if they accept the award, they would still see it. And if they decline the award, they would still see it if I set it on these settings. Then also, of course, I could come down here and then the deadline date here. I can have the same deadline as the application, but of course, if I was creating an accepted section, I would want to put a section deadline. Of course, that would be past the application date. So this would be after I would want to time it according to after they had been awarded. I want to, maybe they're getting awarded 3 months after the application, and I want to give them another month to accept the award and complete this specific section that I've built for them. So then of course I would just want to make sure I change the dates here and gave them the time frame needed to complete that by, and then a deadline time. But otherwise, if this was part of the initial application, then I would say inherit from application to keep the same deadline date as the application form. And then also you notice you can have sections without a deadline. So that's one way that you would set statuses and how you could use that. Also, we have what's called post-acceptance forms. And that would be, of course, after the acceptance stage. They've accepted their award. And so now only the ones that have accepted their award, I would want them to have this post-accepted section. And I might want this section to be, maybe next year, a year after the application process. So I could adjust the deadline. And then, of course, I would want them to only see this if they were at selected for an award and award accepted. If they declined it, I do not want them to have this section because they declined the award, they didn't get it. I don't want them to complete this section. So then I would just set the status on that. Now with post-accepted sections, there is one more additional setting that you always want on a post-accepted section, and that's the submit button. So you see here, you can turn the submit button off, and on all other sections, I recommend that you do that because it can get confusing to the applicant if you don't. But on a post-accepted section, you must have a submit button because this is coming after the applicants started their application and they've initially submitted that initial application. They've gone through and exhausted the statuses. There's no more statuses because the last one was award accepted. And then how do you know they've completed it? Well, there's a report called post-acceptance report. And if you create a section that says post-acceptance, and that submit button is very important, And so when they complete that section, they hit the submit button, and then that post-acceptance report will report on all the post-accepted sections that have been submitted. So it's very important with the post-accepted section to have that submit button. Otherwise, the submit button really serves no purpose except confusing the applicant. So I always recommend any other section type, do not put a submit button on there. The only other reason you would want a submit button is maybe you have a section, and when the applicant completes that, you might want to lock them out so they can't submit. They can't go back in and change that specific section. So you could say lock after submit yes, give them a submit button. They click the submit button on that section, and once they submit it and go out of that section, they can't go back in and change it. That's the only other reason why you would want to have a submit button other than a post-accepted section. So then, of course, down here, the final thing then here is the instructions for that section. So this is where you would type your instructions for the applicant to complete this specific section. When they click on the section icon, it opens up, and these would be the instructions at the top of the page. Now, one exception to the rule is if this is a request section. It says request section. So if this is a request section type, of course, this request section is going to the nominated individual. So don't get confused. Some of our clients tend to take this instruction here on a request and type instructions to the applicant. The applicant doesn't see this section. This is hidden. Remember, this is private from the applicant. So these instructions would be instructions to the nominated individual if you were creating a request section. So don't get those confused. A request section, these instructions are to the requested nominated individual, not the applicant. Otherwise, these are instructions to the applicant. So let me just see real quick if we have any questions about these sections and see if we can cover some of them here real quick. So okay, we'll get to someone has a question about the add edit. I'll get to that here in a minute on the next screen. That has to do with the conditions. You can't set conditions on the first section, so that's why it doesn't allow that. Okay, yes, we'll get into the logic here in a minute. What happens when a request section is marked no? So when a request section is marked no, it just means that that's not a request section. It will not be a request section then. It'll just be a regular section that the applicant sees. Request section has to be marked yes for it to be a request section. Otherwise, if you put no, it's not a request section. And you can only have one application open at a time. Someone's asking if you can have multiple. You can only have one open. And of course, there's only able to view one. The email template section only show on certain programs. Remember, this is 8.1. However, that has been an availability, at least I want to say maybe 7.5 or 8.0. We've had that availability, but that email template only shows on request sections. So if I have no, you'll notice it does go away, and this is not a request section, and so it does not allow for an email. The only reason it has to have an email is on request sections. Remember, those are built for the applicant to nominate a person to complete that section. That's why there has to be an email template. Otherwise, there's no email templates available on other sections, only request sections with that request icon. And just so you know, this webinar is recorded, and everyone has on their dashboard the help icon here. And all of our webinars are available in the knowledge base by clicking on the help, going to the videos, going to webinars, And of course, right now we're doing this webinar, but it will be added to this listing. And so it'll always be available for you to view. Also in the knowledge base, we have the application form setup guide, which talks about the information we're covering. So you should always have access to this as soon as you get your site. And so immediately when you get your site, it's always good to go to the knowledge base and look around. Also, you'll notice here in the knowledge base, we have training sessions. We have step-by-step video guides that cover this exact same information for you to view. So here's accessing your system. Here is application form setup, step-by-step on how to do the items we're covering today. You can see a lot of that is out there already for you to view. Okay, so continuing on, let me go ahead and close the knowledge base here and exit without save because I don't want to save that section. So that's the setup for the section. Now, the conditions for sections, you can set conditions on a section, which is what you see here. And you'll notice this very first item, this is the first display order question number 1. You can never hide the first icon on the dashboard because it's assuming it's the first one the applicant sees. You cannot hide that. If you want it to be shown in another area, then you have to just change the display order, so it does not allow for hiding of the first section. You would want to put it in another location if you wanted to hide it. So of course, to set conditions, you can see these have conditions set on them. You can actually, if you have multiple sections and they're all having the same condition based off of the same question, then what you can do is if a condition has not been set yet, so if it's green, it's been set, so it won't allow me to select those. But let's say I have this section and this section, and I want to set a condition that these two sections only appear when an applicant answers a question in this specific section. So I can select multiple if I haven't done any conditions on them yet, click Add Conditions, and then add the condition for both of those sections at the same time. It'll let me select the condition. So I would have to select the section that is the condition for that. So I would have to find the conditional section. So student bio, I don't know what question I can pull on real quick here. Then you would select the section, so maybe race or let's say state. And then say only individuals that had the state that contains, and then I'd have to type in my value IL. Then this is saying when you're setting conditions, it's saying show the selected section when the following conditions are met. So what I'm saying is on both of these sections, when an applicant answers Illinois to this question, then I want these two sections to appear for them to complete. And then I would go ahead and hit save. I'm going to go ahead and exit on this though, but then the condition would be set for both of those questions at the same time. Then of course, if I had to add additional conditions, so if I set them and then I needed to add, maybe this one had 2 conditions to it, then I would come in here, click that, and then click the add condition, and then build the second condition on that one individually. If I just wanted to build it on just one without doing the add conditions on multiple, I can just come here, click the add condition, and build the condition that way based off of the question. Okay. So now let's dive into the sections. I'm going to go in and just click on a section name. And so a section name will allow you to come here and see all the questions built on an application form. And this is what we call the question listing. So of course, if you've cloned your application, it'll show all the available questions. That were built. You'll see here, we've got a couple of different items here. So this is the question name in blue. This is the display order. So this is the order that this question appears on the listing in that section when they click on it. This is question 1, this is question 2, and so forth. These directional arrows that you see here, say I'm building this application form and I might want date of birth to fall in a different location. I can actually go into click on the application question and change the display order there. Or if I just need to move it a couple areas, I can hit the down button and move it just a couple areas down into the sort order. And you can notice it changes that sort order, or I can move it up doing the same thing if I wanted to change the location of that question. You'll also notice the system shows the XML name of that question. And then also we have question types that I'll get into in a minute, but this is a good way to quickly do a quick overview of your form and see what type of question. So if this current location is a text question, okay, so you can kind of see what type of question it is real quickly. Anything marked required yes means they have to answer that specific question in the application. If you have a question that you do not want to completely delete, but you want to exclude it from the application form, what exclude does is it excludes it from the form. It hides that question so it's not part of the application. But let's say it's maybe you cloned this application and you don't want to lose this question because you might want to clone it for another application that you want the question in. So what you can do is the one you don't want it in, exclude it. Don't delete it completely, just exclude it, and it'll always be there anytime you need to bring it back. And then of course, hidden from applicant, you can hide a question from an applicant. Hidden from reviewer means the reviewers and the review committee cannot see that question. And then also you have the ability for default values. You can have a question, let's say you have a question like state, and the majority of your applicants are going to be in the state of Virginia. And so instead of having to answer that question, you can actually give them the default value for that question, and then they can skip that question without answering it. And then if you have conditions, you'll notice here this specific section doesn't have any conditions, but again, it's the same type of with the sections. These are conditions. When setting conditions on questions, however, you are setting the condition on hiding. Sections, you're setting the condition to show the section. However, when you're setting conditions on questions, you're saying hide this question unless this condition has been met. It's the opposite. So of course, let's get into creating some questions. So if you want to create a question, and I'm just going to go over some of the key questions, and then real briefly, maybe some of the newer ones that some of you may not be familiar with. So of course, to add a question, you can click Add Custom Question to open up an empty question dialog box. However, over here, we have the question. If you want to click on a question and maybe make an adjustment to it, let's say it's a drop-down question and maybe you want to add some items to the drop-down or remove the items, you can just simply, if it's an existing question, click on that question's name and then make the adjustment there. And then of course, if it's a drop-down question, to get to the values of that listing, you have the add values here. So, and I'll get into setting some of that here in a minute. So let's go out and just start with a blank question. So let's click the Add Custom Question. And when you open up it, you see it's a blank, pretty much a blank field. So this box here, this is where you type the question that the applicant sees, the question you want them to answer. This is what they see. Okay, so you format it how you want them to see it. You can, that's why there's the fonts. You can make it bigger, you can make it smaller, you can change the color, you can bold it, you can underline it, and so forth. This is where what they would see on their side. The report column name. So when you create reports using this specific question, you probably don't want the whole question as your column header. So this is where you can put an abbreviated version of that specific question. Instead of having the whole question typed out, you can do an abbreviated version for your Excel reports. And then XML name, that's the very important one. XML name is how the system maps from one application form to another. So like I said, our team likes to use a naming convention. So I would put the section at the beginning that this question fell under, and then an underscore, and then probably a abbreviated version of this specific item. report version, something like that, of the name of the column name. And so then all of my applications going forward, if I wanted data to import from one to another, I would want to make sure they all have this exact XML name under the exact section with the section XML name the same. Bubble instructions, what bubble instructions allow, a lot of you have probably seen on an application form. This is where you could type a specific instructions on the specific question, and it would provide a little blue question icon next to that question. They can click on that icon, and when they hover over that icon, whatever you typed in this instructions, they would see on that specific item. So for types, so the question type, this is where you determine when the applicant answers this question, what type of question is it going to be formatted as. So I'm going to click the drop-down listing here, and you can see the different types of questions. Unfortunately, because of time limits, as you can see, there's a lot. If we went over every single one, we would be here several hours. We do have the guide. The guide is attached to the webinar today, and I will show you that at the end of the webinar, how to get to that. It's the most current guide with the most current settings. So here you will notice, for instance, the checkbox drop down, extended checkbox, and radio button. Those are all where you would force a value on your applicant. And the applicant would get a list, and they would select from that list. So check the differences between the ones that I've pointed out here. Checkbox, what a checkbox question is it'll give them, like, let's say you have a question, maybe male or not male or female, majors. And you only maybe have 3 of them. It's only for a short list. You have 3 major, you have a question for them to enter their major, select the major that you are most interested in. And maybe you only have 3 majors, like business, computer science, or maybe something health related. You might have just those 3. And you create a checkbox. And the reason you would use the checkbox and not a radio button, because a radio button you can do the same thing, is a checkbox allows for multiple selections. So they could select more than one. The difference between that and a radio button is a radio button would be for a short list like that, but only allowing them to pick one. Radio button, select one, checkbox, multiple choice. Short list gives them a little box that they can put a check mark in, checkbox. Radio button is a little circle that they put a dot in, they select the button, and then that's the selection they've made. They can only choose one. Now we also have drop down and an extended checkbox, which are similar. Extended checkbox, if you have a long listing, say you have majors and you have a long listing of majors, extended checkbox will allow an applicant to select multiple, or maybe they can select multiple. Drop down, where'd it go? Drop down is the same, except they have where they can only choose one item in that list. So extended checkbox means multiple selection. Drop down means they can only select one from that list. That's the difference between those. So of course, anytime you select one of those 4 items, I'm going to select drop down, you will see an add values icon or button that shows up to the right. The add values is where you would add the values that you want the applicants to complete, want them to answer. You want to force the answer. And you'll notice you have a label and you have a value. The label is what the applicant sees. The value is what you on the back end want to see and capture. So sometimes you might have coding on your system. This applicant doesn't know a code. So you might put the label of what the applicant's seeing, but maybe you want a code because you're used to working with the code. You can put a different reply here for the value. So of course, it's just a matter of entering the values in this list. And just another note, if this is a drop-down listing or an extended checkbox, you must start this listing with the word select in both the label, I'm tabbing, and then I'm typing it in the value as well. That is very important on drop-downs and extended checkboxes. Radio buttons And checkboxes, you do not need to do this because you're not giving them a long list. They have the checkboxes. It's going across the page. The system doesn't need to know if they've answered it. However, extended checkboxes and drop downs, you start with the word select, because when they get to that question, whatever's in the first item here, the first value that's listed, the system will answer that question as. However, if it sees the word select, it knows do not answer that question. The applicant has to select from a listing. So of course, when you're done entering your label and value, you hit the plus sign, and that's how you save that item in there. So of course, if you wanted to add some values here, you could do so. So let's say I wanted to do a long listing. I'm just going to type in a few here, though I'm not going to do the whole thing. So maybe if they're the same, I can just type it in here, hit the plus, and it'll populate the value. If they're different, I would come here, and maybe I want to do a abbreviation here for my internal staff. Then I would have to type it and then hit the plus sign. But if it's the same, I can just type it in the label and it would not change. I also have the ability here to go to the editor box. And if I have a long list, I can actually have that list in another document, and then I can come here and cut and paste it. However, what you'll notice here is the first item here is the label. Then we have it separated with the tilde symbol. And then after the tilde symbol, the system knows that that's the value. So of course you can, here, when you're typing the actual item, you can put a space. But when you jump from the label to the value, do not put a space. Use the tilde, and then you can type in the next value so that the system knows that that is the value. Okay? But in between the two, do not put a space. Use the tilde. However, you can have spaces within. Also, when you're creating values, do not use special symbols like an ampersand. Do not use ampersands. You have to type the word and out. Do not use slashes or dashes or parentheses. Those are all coding symbols, and so the system will not be able to read that value accurately. So make sure you do not use any special symbols when creating values. So of course you just come here. If the label and the value is the same, of course you don't have to type it all out. You can just come here, list your items like this without separating them, and then click Save, and then you can see how it populates that information accordingly. Let me just plus that. Okay. Also, let's say you want to change the sort of this. You come here, you've entered it, and you're like, you know what, I need to change the sort. You can come to the editor box and just come up here, and then of course you can Control X, move it down, and then move that up there if that's how you wanted to put it. Or let's say you wanted to remove an item up here. You don't want to have to go through and delete all those. You just want to remove the one. You can just come here, make sure you remove the space, and then you can click Save, and it'll be no longer in that specific line. Okay? So that's how you would create values on questions that require values. If this was a radio button, of course, I wouldn't put the word select. I could just come here, like a yes, no is a good example of a radio button. And I wouldn't need the word select. And then that would just be they have to answer yes or no to that question, and they get a radio button. And this is an example of a radio button. This is what a radio button looks like. You can see here. So that's that question type. Another question type that you can use is a dependent drop-down. You can actually have a question that is dependent on another question. So let's say you have, for instance, a state question. And in question number 1, they answer the word state. And then if they answer state as Virginia, then when they get to the city question, you want to create a dependent drop-down that says that if they answer Virginia in state, I only want the Virginia cities to appear in the city question. So when building the city question, I can build that city question as a dependent drop-down. And I can go to the Add Values. And when I click on a dependent drop-down and add a value, I would say, what's the section that the dependent question is built in? So maybe, let's see if I can get to it real quick here if I can remember where it's at. Maybe student address. And then what's the question I want to pull on? That doesn't have any data in it. Let's go to student bio, maybe. Okay, I select state. And then I can click the option here of the state that they're to select in that question. So I could say, let's say Florida. And then what I do here is then what are the cities that are to appear for that applicant when they say Florida? So I would come here and I would say Tampa. And of course I would do my tildes for the value. I could say Sarasota and start listing all the cities for Florida. So then when they get to state, they answer Florida. When they get to the city question, only the cities for Florida will appear. Then I would want to make sure I save this. Click Save. That's very important. Then once I hit Save, I can switch gears to the next state and then come here and then enter the city for Alabama that I want them to see. And then click Save. You must click Save in between each one and then go to the next one and so forth. Okay? So you can see then when I pick the other states that I've set them, it'll start showing them there. And that's how you build the dependent. You select the question. That's the question that causes the trigger. So this was state, and then what the reply is in that question. And then you start whatever reply, first reply they answer, what's the list they see? Save it. You must save it. Switch to the next reply, Alaska. Do those, save it. And that's how you can build a dependent dropdown. Another new question type, electronic signature, of course. If you want to capture the signature of the applicant, you would use electronic signature. The electronic signature forces the applicant to type their name the same way as their login name. It goes off of their login name, their first name and last name. They have to type that signature in. Email forces them to type in an email in an email format. It will not allow them to type in anything other than that. Encrypted field, that's a new item that we have, a new question type. So an encrypted field allows you to capture a question, like maybe you want to get social security number. If it's an encrypted field, only the global admin would be able to see the social security number when viewing that applicant's application form if it's an encrypted field. It allows you to hide it so that not everyone in the organization staff could see it. Only the global admin access would be able to see the answer to that specific question. Let's see, matching fund eligibility. Someone asked a question about one application fund with multiple scholarships. That's a question type you would use. What this does is when you start adding all those funding sources and all the criteria to match them, you can add the actual question so that the applicants know that they've been matched for that specific, and that is a complex setup. So a lot of times if you're doing something with multiple scholarships, you would want our team to assist you with that. If you have a payment associated with your application form, so if you remember in the general information setup, you could allow where you could enter the amount that was due for that application form. So the payment gateway is where the team would build that payment link. So the applicant would come to that question, click a button to make the payment. It would take them out to that third-party software. They'd make the payment. Once they made the payment, the third-party software would communicate back, and then this question would show that they had paid that specific item. That's how this payment gateway question works. The application link question. This is a question that, let's say you have a section, and this is also helpful in maybe staff sections. You want to see specific questions, how an applicant answered a question, or maybe in those request sections. So what an application link question does is it allows you to create, you have a question built already. So let's say you have a question built with the applicant's name, first name, last name, or some other information, or major, or something like that. And you created the original question, but you want that question to show up in another area another section, but you don't want the applicant to have to answer it again. They already answered it. You can actually create a link to that question in another section by just clicking Application Link. Let's see if it's going to let me do it today. Or actually, I'm telling you wrong. Application link, sorry. Linked questions up here is where you would create a linked question to another question in your application form. You would click the add, and I am frozen. And then you would find the question you want to link it to. So let's say I want link to first name. I don't want them to have to enter their name again. So as soon as I do that, it builds the question, blocks everything out, and I can just hit save and exit. So that when they come to that section, the reply that they answered in the first section will now be showing in this second section. That question will be there, but it'll show it answered, and they will not have to answer it again, and it will not allow them to change the answer at this stage. The application link question, sorry, I got off on that. For some reason, my site is freezing up on me. I do not know what's going on. Let me just try to go out and come back in. See if that clears it. Might be upset with me for choosing too many different types. So application link, that question. So if, let's say you have maybe a pre-qualifying application. And this is what we call a two-stage application process. So the first application stage, they fill out an application form and you kind of go through a qualification process. If they meet that qualification process, they are then invited to another application that you've got built on the system. They can be invited to that additional application and complete that application. So what the application link question is it allows you to create a question, and only the applicants, and you would more than likely create this question in a section that's tagged to a specific status, so that only applicants that had a status, say for instance, selected for an award, that would mean they were approved. So I approved my applicants, I've moved them to selected for an award, they're at that status, they get to that status, and there's a section that'll appear on their dashboard. So then I can shoot them a quick email and say, hey, you've been approved to go down to apply for the such and such application. Please return to your initial application to the such and such to the approval section. Click on that section and you will see a question directing you to the new application form. And that's what this application link is used for. The application link question will allow you to create a link to an application. So you would select it. For some reason, it wants to freeze up there. Is it working? So you'd create the question and you would say something like, click the application name to be directed to the new application form. Okay. And then you would select the application they're to be directed to. It would give you the listing of those applications that were within date range. They'd have to be within date range. And then you have a choice. They can be linked to it. They can click on it, link to it, and they can see it and be linked to it directly. They can click on it and apply. Where they can have a button that says, do you want to apply to this? Or they can click on it. You can have a selection to where they click on the link, that application. The application, they get directed directly to that application. And it's different from the apply. They apply, but what the apply and import does is it starts the application for them, puts it in their My Applications tab, and then any sections that were in application 1 that you don't want the applicant to have to repeat completing, you can build, you want to make sure they're built in the application 2, and then it'll automatically import the values. If the XML name, of course, is the same, it'll import those values from application 1 into 2. They don't have to answer the questions again, but then they can continue the application where they left off. That's what that specific application link question does. It's another new feature that we have. And then the other one I want to kind of touch on is this budget demographic question. So what the budget demographic question does is it allows you to create a pre-formatted spreadsheet to give to your applicants. They can complete the spreadsheet and then re-upload the spreadsheet to the section. And what it does is when you create a budget demographic section, as soon as you create the section, you're going to upload the template that you want your applicants to use. You're going to attach it to it. It's going to build a private section in the system. A section will already be built where they can, that captures all the replies to that Excel spreadsheet. So let's say you have a budget form that you want them to complete. So here I would have my budget question here. And let me just pull this up here. Give you an example of what we're talking about here. So I would say here, we'll probably have more a message question before this, but then this specific question to build it. This is the last thing I want to show you today. Upload completed budget form. I'm going to give it my column name, my XML. I'm just going to name it real quick. I'm not going to follow convention here. You choose the type budget demographic. And then you click this icon here. This icon, it's important to use the pre-formatted one that we give you. This is the one we provide for you. You click on the green icon. And when you click on the green icon, it will download that to Excel on your computer to capture the document. So I'm going to come here. It opens it up in Excel. I need to hit Enable Editing so I can edit this document. And I just need to follow the instructions in red here. So the instructions in red are very important. It's telling me what I have to do in this document, but it's just a matter of following the instructions. And so here I can give column headers. So let's say I want to do spring, whoops, close. Spring semester. I'm just going to do something real quick here. Summer semester and fall semester. I might do something like that. I don't need these two columns, so of course I can go ahead and get rid of those. I can delete them. I don't need to keep them. I can go ahead and expand this because I'm working on it. Let's bring that down. Now this box here, you do not want to put any items in. This is an important field for the system. However, if you want to, you can insert a row above it. And maybe if you want to put some additional header information up here, you can do so. But this specific field, you do not want it to populate. I'm just going to delete that. And then here is where then you could add your items that you want them to answer for these periods. And then you can actually add formulas to this report. I'm going to do totals here, and then I might just do a quick formula here. Let's do something real quick. Okay, and so that's the end of my report. So then, of course, I would want to get rid of any items I did not use. So then I would get rid of this. So notice here it says the first column heading should be left blank. That's this one here. And then it says remove the notes after updating. So I'm clearing my report, and then I'm just going to get rid of this line here, because what it's doing is it's going to of course build off of each one. And if I needed to add more items, I'd want to make sure and hit insert. So I want these to be grayed so that it knows it's within that chart. But if I didn't want it, I want to make sure and delete, because what it's going to do is it's going to create a question in that section, that private section it's going to build for this. It's going to create a question. It's going to say spring semester books, summer semester books, fall semester books. It's going to say spring semester tuition. It's going to have a question for every one of these items. So that's why I want to make sure I don't have anything out there that doesn't belong. And then I also get rid of these red notes. So now my report is built. This is the report I want my applicants to complete. So now all I have to do is just take this document and save it. File, and you want to save it as the same format. You don't want to change the formatting. Keep it an Excel document. I'm just going to say File, Save As. Let's see if I can save it to my PC real quick. Desktop, Save. And then I can close the document. And now all I need to do is upload the document I just created, select Template File, See if I can find it here. It's going to download it to this question. And this is the same question that the applicant would download it to. And notice once it's downloaded, it says 100% complete. Then I can either save and exit and go to the section that it built. There, it loaded it. Or if I click Save Now, oh, I got to put a display order. Let's just make this number 1. If I click Save Now, I can, at this stage, go see the section that this just built. So it says go to Section Details. And now I have this section in my application form, Sections Budget Form. And you'll notice every column I created there. So when the applicant populates that document, they upload the document to that question. It will go to this section and populate every one of these questions with the replies that the applicant completed. This is helpful so if you want to run a report across, like maybe you want to see all your applicants and you want to see how they answered just the tuition question. You don't want to open up the Excel spreadsheet, have all these Excel spreadsheets that you have to go to. You want to be able to run an ad hoc report. This is build a section for you based off of that document, that budget sheet or demographic, whatever you want to capture in that Excel spreadsheet. It builds. They can complete the Excel spreadsheet, but then this builds you a section in the background to capture that data as a specific section. And so you'll notice if I go to Sections now in the Sections listing, if I scroll to the bottom, I now have that budget form section. And then notice here, it's an active section. It's a staff section, but it's also hidden from the applicant. The applicant cannot see this. And this section, of course, will not show 100% complete. Only staff sees this, so don't be alarmed if you don't see this complete, because it doesn't really have required questions in it. Because remember, section completion is built off of required questions and questions that are marked required. Okay, so that's the budget demographic question type. So that's all I'm going to touch on in regards to the question types, and then I'm going to just kind of go over some of these other settings in the question build real quick here, because we are getting into a lot of overtime, into 2 hours. So if I go to Add Custom Question, you will see this required. So of course, required means they have to answer a question. Each section has to have at least one required question in order for it to show 100% complete. The 100% completion is based off of required questions. If a question is not required, the applicant will not have to answer that specific question. They can bypass it. Exclude is how you can exclude a question. It's like deleting it but not getting rid of it. It's just not part of the application form, but if you want to bring it back, you can go ahead and change that to no. If you want to hide a question from your reviewer and the review committee, you do not want an applicant the reviewer to see that question, you must hide it. So you can hide it from the reviewer, yes. Hidden from applicant, you could have a question you want to hide from the applicant. However, remember, if it's hidden from the applicant, they can't answer that question. So there may not be a reason to have that there. It's hidden from the applicant, so you definitely would not want to put that required, but there is the ability to create maybe a statement that you want to for that applicant. Like you might want to do a message question. It's a message only for staff members. Like maybe they're looking at it. You might want to put a message, hide it from the applicant, but you want staff when they're looking at this section to maybe look for something specific. You can add a message question for them to do it, but make sure it's not required. Okay, hidden from applicant, you can see it takes that away. Well, the message, when you create a message, it doesn't require that to be required because it's just information only. Message questions are. Show on award screen if you're using Manage Awards. So those of you who have multiple scholarships tied to one application form, that one-to-many process, you're using the Manage Awards. And so this allows you to tag questions. So if you say yes to this question, when the applicant answers it, their replies will be able to be, you don't have to go to the application form to see how they answered the question. So maybe it's a GPA question, and that's maybe the tiebreaker question, and you don't want to have to click on each applicant's application form. You can actually see the listing of applicants. You'll see a button that shows award questions. Click on that and it'll show you the question that you selected. You can have multiple, there's no limit, and then the reply for that specific question all when you click on that specific section. You don't have to go all the way looking through the whole application to find the reply. It helps in making determinations. Read only means the applicant cannot answer that question. That's mainly used in integration when it's coming from another site. Your data is coming through integration. You don't want the applicant to answer it, but you want the question there. The data is coming from your third-party software into our system. And so, of course, it's just read only. The applicant's not answering that question. It's already populated when they get there from your database. And then the display order, of course, is how the applicant, the order that that question falls in the display. And then, of course, different from the budget, you could have a question that you want to attach a form for the applicant to see to a question. You might have another question, or you might have another form that you want an applicant to fill out. You can actually upload that file for them to click on and download. And so you can upload the file here. So let's say I wanted to give them instructions, maybe, see if I can find something here real quick here. This instructions here on how to do this, or a contract or a document that they need to get someone to sign, and I'm okay with them uploading a PDF version, then I can give them the question. The first one might be a message question that says, please click on the following document, complete it, and then re-upload it to the question following it. So what I would do is I'd create this message, I would upload, give them the document that they're to upload, hit save and exit, and then they could capture the document, and then that document would be available for them. And then, of course, I would have another question below it that I created as a file question. A file question is what you would create for them to be able to download a document. And so I would type a question that says download your document here. I would make that a file question. When you make it a file question, this box here is where you enter the type of file formatting you will allow. So I only want a PDF version. I don't want a Word document. I'm only going to allow them to do a PDF. And then that PDF is the only format that it would allow them to upload. I would not put the .pdf. Notice I just PDF. If I did want to allow Word documents, I could put doc, and I could put docx. Notice I'm making separate lines for each one, but I only want the PDF version is all I would want with this. So that's how, and then I would create that, and then that document that they downloaded, then they could re-upload here to the specific question. Okay, so that's all I have to show you on questions today. We're short on time. We're done with it on the training for today. That's all we've got time for. So let me see if I can see any questions you might have. Here, I've lost my question box. And where'd it go? Here we go. Okay. And if anybody has any specific suggestions, your best way to do a suggestion is enter a support ticket. Support tickets, go to your Zendesk and enter a support ticket, and that's the best way to enter a suggestion. That way they can keep a report of it and a recommendation. And then when we have several clients that have that same recommendation, we can then maybe think about adding it to our system. That's how we can better enhance our system. So if we can have a report of it and have a record of it, it's always better than just a brief suggestion here and there. Let's see. Okay, so any questions that were not answered today, feel free to enter a support ticket to get an answer to those questions. Unfortunately, we are all out of time. So since we are out of time, we won't be able to address any more of your questions. But always feel free to enter a support ticket. I've also attached today the handout that covers the information that we covered today on setting up your application form. Of course, because of time limits, we don't have a lot of time to go into every detail of building an application form because there is so much in regards to building an application form. Every client has something different that has to be set up differently. So of course, that's where our implementation team always comes in and is helpful in helping you build your application form because there is so much that can be covered, so many different question types you can use. When should I use this? When should I use that? To be able to cover that all in a training can be quite difficult. So of course, again, we're going to close for today, but for your handout, if you notice here, let me go to my PowerPoint here, if I can get back to it. You will notice underneath the question section, I believe that they've changed the sections a little bit. So look for, it says handouts, and there is this little plus sign. If you click on it, it'll open up and you should see this module 3. It is a very large document. It's a couple hundred pages long. So you will want to download it from the site here and get a copy of that so that you can have all the details that we weren't able to cover today. So again, I thank you for your time. I will leave this open a little bit longer to give you time to download that because like I said, it is a large document. So I will stay on the site for about 10 minutes. And well, actually, I'll go ahead and stay on for a few minutes here. I do have another meeting following that I do have to attend. So I can leave this up, go ahead and download that. And if you don't get a copy of it, like I said, it is on your help under the knowledge base, under your help on your help link at the bottom of your page on your site, and under the application module, you can access it there as well. Okay, so again, I thank you for your time, and also be sure to go to the knowledge base to get a copy of this webinar. And all of you that registered, we will be sending out a link to this webinar as well. So I thank you very much, and you have a very good day.